Welcome to Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. This is Banned Books Week, our annual celebration of the freedom to read. 2017's theme is Text Against Tyranny, the stories some would silence and the power of literature in all its forms to enlighten dark hours. Episode 272 for September 29th, 2017. The Forbidden Books of Da Lin Monastery. The story is written and narrated by Andrew K. Ho. Andrew K. Ho teaches and practices Choi Lun Foot, Kung Fu, and Tai Chi in Southern California, where he also writes speculative YA fiction. He's been a high school English teacher, an assistant language teacher in Japan, and a college professor. His academic work in children's literature can be found in The Looking Glass. This story is Andrew's first professional genre sale. Congratulations, Andrew. We'll put a link to his webpage and his Twitter account in the show notes. And now we've a tale to tell.
The Forbidden Books of Da Lin Monastery by Andrew K. Ho. Hong Lung watched, horror-struck, as the book slid along the flagstone floor of the monastery library. The spine shivered, the cover's fabric shredded itself, and something like spittle foamed along its edges. The title's brush-stroked ideographs broke from their calligraphy, ink squirming like black worms. The untamed writing made Hong Lung want to vomit. In his 16 years training as a warrior monk at Da Lin Monastery, he'd never seen anything like it. Judging from Wong Kum's bloodless face, neither had he. The book snapped at Wong Kum's foot, and he jumped back. As rivals, they'd battled plenty through the years, and Hong Lung wasn't displeased at Wong Kum's panic. But besides Da Lin's ferocious martial reputation, the forbidden texts were the monastery's greatest treasure. Even a rabbit attack book was precious. "Jump on it!" Hong Lung whispered. Wong Kum stepped into a fighting cat stance, weaving chi energies around himself, fingers curved into claws. White tiger awaiting prey. "You jump on it, orphan boy!" Hong Lung heard rustling. On looming shelves, books yawned open and closed like thousands of flickering moth wings. They were surrounded by hostile books. For years, Hong Lung had tested his kung fu against giant spiders, demonic cats, winged snakes, whatever the raw chi energies of Da Lin's testing labyrinth summoned. So had Wong Kum and the others. They had been raised from novices to acolytes and apprenticed to elder monks for further training. The library apprenticeship was the most dangerous. The acolytes had gasped when Hong Lung's assignment was announced, though Hong Lung had relished the chance to escape them. He embraced the challenge. But Wong Kum, most spiteful of them all, also got the library. They glared at each other after hearing they would train under venerable elder Bak Fei, the mysterious warrior monk who was librarian. The chi weavings holding the library's doors had parted for them. They'd entered, found their master missing, and the book creeping towards them. This apprenticeship was getting worse by the minute. "The forbidden books can't leave," Hong Lung said, eyeing the snarling manuscript. Was the library like the testing labyrinths, booby-trapped, able to summon monstrous creatures? Was this all some activated defense? "Maybe this is how the ones before us failed." No elder spoke of it, but rumor was the library's last apprentices had been expelled. Hong Lung and Wong Kum were the first replacements in decades. "You think it's another test?" Wong Kum asked. Hong Lung called chi into himself, his strength and speed trebling with the energies he summoned. "Everything's a test," he muttered, recalling years of sparring circles and brutal labyrinth runs under the cold observation of instructor monks. But severe as monastery life was, Hong Lung couldn't be expelled. Outsider that he was, Da Lin was still his only home. The refugees fleeing through their mountains always brought tales about the warlord's bloody feuds, of the chaotic outside world. Hong Lung remembered his own slain parents. Wong Kum swallowed. "Here goes nothing." He stepped into the book's path. It launched itself at him. Wang Gum made raking tiger strikes. His chi-hardened fingers tore the binding. The shelves rioted with enraged manuscripts. "Don't gawk!" Wang Gum yelped under the book's continued assault. "Help me, orphan!" Hong Lung remembered mornings crawling out the dormitory when he was 9, all the novices pawing along the freezing stone walkways to breakfast, Wang Gum ramming into his left shoulder, one of Wang Gum's cronies crashing into his right. After breakfast, everyone bashing limbs against wooden dummies, and a rock hitting Hong Lung's shaven skull. Wang Gum smirked as he turned away. The indifferent gazes of the instructor monks, who saw everything. Outsider. Unenlightened one. Yes, Hong Lung wasn't ordained like the others, but a sniveling war orphan left on Thalin's doorstep. He could never master the monks' cold logic, their strictly ordered emotions. But Hong Lung's feelings made him a furious fighter. He leapt, fists and feet twirling. North Star vaults the heavens. His kick slammed the book down. He landed in a ready stance. "Is it over?" Wang Gum glared at him, but shrugged. The fallen book riffled back to life, flying straight for Hong Lung this time. He parried, ducked, retreated, realizing why Wang Gum had panicked. This book was ferocious. The writing on its pages was as rebelliously unreadable as its cover. The swirling ink, supposedly a chi weaving designed to safeguard the library's forbidden ideas, dazed Hong Lung. The attacking book maneuvered him against a shelf, and the texts imprisoned there hissed in his ears. He heard Wang Gum's running footsteps fading away. Coward. Hong Lung wouldn't run. He'd proved that he belonged. The book bit him. Hong Lung shrieked and ripped the manuscript off him. Blood. Tiny puncture marks on his shoulder. How was that possible? Seriously, he thought, as spots flooded his vision. Had he just been defeated by a book? His dimming gaze caught on the text lining the shelves, on the restless ideographs solidifying into just recognizable words. Blackness claimed him, and he tipped forward. Someone caught Hong Lung before he fell. A wave of healing chi dispelled his faintness. "That'll do," a gruff voice said. Hong Lung looked into a tired, white-eyebrowed face and bottomless black eyes. The book charged again, but the venerable elder waved his hand. Another flash of chi. The book hit the floor, and stayed down. "Master Bak Fei!" Hong Lung breathed, rushing to bow. Wonderful. He'd almost fainted before his master. Wang Gum stood behind Bak Fei with a hung dog look. Hong Lung rubbed his shoulder. His skin was unbroken. He felt it again. Had he imagined the bite? Maybe he had. The library had gone deathly silent. Bak Fei picked up the fallen book. The rips were gone. An unblemished, untarnished text. Its only uniqueness was its swirling calligraphy. Bak Fei peered at the text and frowned. "Master," Wang Gum began, Bak Fei said, "I don't remember this book." Wang Gum shut his mouth. After all, they were standing before a living legend, one who never ventured into the monastery proper. Until now, he'd existed only in stories to them. Bak Fei was easily a century old, the warrior sage who thrashed the warlord band so badly they left Thalin alone. The only elder without apprentices. Bak Fei had the white eyebrows of his namesake. He wore saffron yellow robes, not the gray tunics of the acolytes and novices. He towered over them. The meditation beads around his neck looked like rounded boulders. Bak Fei grunted. "Must be forgetting these titles." He turned to Hong Lung. "You were beaten," he rumbled. Hong Lung's face grew hot. Wang Gum smirked, then froze under Bak Fei's glower. "And you ran." The elder sighed. "I guess you two will have to do." Bak Fei pressed the book into Wang Gum's chest. "Your first test, acolytes. Reshelve this." Bak Fei started walking down the library's main hall. Honglong and Wang Gum glanced at each other before rushing to follow.
The library is always sealed, the elder explained, but the chi weavings need resting time. You must defend the library when the barrier seals go down. You must also sweep, dust, clean.
The library was vast. Bak Fei strode about as if walking through a meadow. Long tables on which lanterns glowed with living chi stretched between shelves a full story tall. Circular windows revealed faraway peaks, misty clouds, straggling mountain willows.
The books are banned to all but the elders,
Bak Fei continued. He spoke like a sad giant, not in the severe, imperious way of the other elders. It struck Honglong that Bak Fei was the first person who showed any emotion at Dalin.
The ideas contained here are wild, difficult to contain.
He rounded on them.
As you've seen, these books are alive. They'll stop at nothing to escape. Only Dalin's separation from the outside world makes us worthy of safeguarding them.
Amitofo. The enlightened live above the mundane, Wang Gum recited. Honglong grimaced. Kiss up. Bak Fei seemed unimpressed.
Just safeguard the text, acolyte.
He pointed at the book Wang Gum clutched.
That one freed itself. It won't be the last.
Honglong made the mistake of glancing at the dizzying ink and had to look away. Master, he asked, how can we reshelve that book if we can't read it? Bak Fei sighed deeply, as if Honglong had said something especially tragic.
Learning to read the swirling ink is part of your training.
Despite themselves, Honglong and Wang Gum shot each other a look. We'll read the forbidden texts? Honglong asked. He thought his apprenticeship was about guarding the books, but to read texts that didn't preach enlightenment? Surely it was blasphemy. Yet excitement flared in Honglong. Many forgotten animal styles were stashed here, secret and powerful chi weavings. If Honglong could master such knowledge, he'd be a true warrior monk. He'd finally belong. Bak Fei nodded grudgingly.
Eventually, slowly.
Wang Gum looked sick. Honglong gazed at the alien writing, resisting his nausea. It was whispered many elder monks couldn't master the swirling ink. Could he really do this? But the training dummies had seemed impossible to Honglong at first. So had the sparring circles, the complicated chi diagrams in his training sutras. And what was scarier than a testing labyrinth? Honglong would succeed. It was a matter of persistence. Bak Fei turned away.
Get to know this place.
It was a dismissal, but a question flew from Honglong before he could stop it. Did the last apprentices fail because they couldn't read? Honglong regretted himself instantly. Such impudence! Why would the master discuss past failures? But Bak Fei halted mid-stride, his back to them.
No, acolyte. They failed because they could read. It was what they read that hurt them.
As if apprenticeship wasn't enough, a crowd of refugees arrived at the monastery, the warlord's latest victims. Whenever people fled to Dalin, the elders sacrificed their meditations in enlightenment to give aid, lowering themselves to the world's mundane suffering. Monks in training, including Honglong and Wang Gum, also had to assist, on top of their new library duties. All that knowledge, Honglong said, ladling rice gruel into bowls Wang Gum passed him. Hours! The monastery's courtyard, normally filled with novices drilling chi weavings, now held dozens of bedraggled men and women. If we succeed, we'll become librarians, Wang Gum grated. Keepers of the world's deadliest books. Face it, orphan, the master's crazy. You saw the swirling ink. Only a select few have ever mastered it. Honglong wanted to say they'd become students of the greatest warrior monk in Thalin's history, but he heard a baby's cries. Stony-faced elders and acolytes moved efficiently among the injured, applying salves and bandages. The warlords had used poisoned darts. The wounds were terrible. Honglong's ladling slowed. He'd been a refugee himself once. "Ami Tofo," he whispered. Wangkum thumped the pot. "Abbot wants us to fail. He's punishing us for our fights you started." "You threw rocks at me," Honglong retorted. "And you smashed a row of dummies. You lack control, orphan." Honglong stirred the porridge for stewed prunes. Those refugees looked half-starved. "And throwing rocks shows control?" Honglong narrowed his eyes. "Or running away? From a library?" "I was going," Wangkum grated, drawing out each word, "for a weapon." Honglong snorted. The evening sun dipped below the mountain peaks, setting the sky afire. Wangkum squinted at the sunset. "That was a good fight," he said. "With the dummies, what were we, 14? Honglong filled more bowls, picturing himself and Wangkum charging each other as enraged novices, other boys scrambling away as thick wooden chunks flew through the air. "We wrecked 3 dummies using dragon-style weavings. Abbot made us clean latrines for a month." "Couldn't tell if he was upset over the damage or that we'd already mastered dragon weavings," Wangkum said with a quiet smile. "We are the 2 strongest acolytes." "So maybe we were given to Bak Fei because we're the only 2 who can succeed," Honglong said. They needed to master the ink. The last apprentices had gotten that far, at least. Even so, Honglong shivered. He imagined another scene, where swirling ideographs chased each other across their pages, dashing on themselves against the paper in their fury. Honglong remembered what he'd seen when he almost fainted. The squiggly lines slowing, coalescing. His shoulder ached, and he rubbed it. Bak Fei taught them the library's chi-woven barrier seals. He told of its founding, stories Honglong and Wangkum already knew. Throughout history, Dalin's great warrior monks scoured the world, weaving chi strands to extract the troubling thoughts that drove people mad. Under the monks' castings, the entrapped ideas became words, swirling ink spilling into paragraphs, wrestled onto pages, manacled into manuscripts. The resulting forbidden books were housed within what became the monastery's library. Beside the testing labyrinths, it became Thalin's most dangerous location. Deadlier than any warlord, these books could infect entire nations. People would kill for these ideas if they were ever allowed to take hold. Though Bak Fei said they would read the text, he gave no training on mastering the swirling ink. He treated it as something that would eventually happen, like aging or dying.
"When you're ready, the ink will stop. You must inform me when this happens."
Bak Fei paused here, his eyes glazing over, perhaps seeing past regrets. Maybe his last apprentices.
"Never read the books on your own, for in reading you'll face great danger. The books here are seductive. You must prove your ability to resist their temptations."
Wangkum looked disgusted. "Impure thoughts," he muttered to the floor. Yet Honglong felt the old drive to prove himself. Yes, the books physically attacked, but how could reading hurt anybody? He didn't want to wait for them to become legible. He wanted to start training now. "Master," he said, "surely we can resist." Bak Fei shook his head.
"When you're ready. Go slowly, acolyte."
He finished by explaining the glyphs on the books, which denoted any errant book's proper location. And the books were errant. The shelves seethed, book covers rustling as wild ink stormed across them in mind-dizzying patterns. Bak Fei disappeared often into the library's corridors or left altogether. Hong Lung and Wang Gum patrolled the library, wrestling back texts that broke from their bindings. Strangely, the only text that behaved was the attacking book from their first day. Its restless glyph was a mystery, a sigil that didn't match any section markings. Hong Lung didn't want to ask for help, it being their first test, but gave in to Wang Gum's wheedling. How long before the book woke and attacked again? Bak Fei frowned over the strange glyph.
"This wasn't here before,"
he muttered. He took the book.
"On second thought, I'll reshelve this one."
Hong Lung sighed after Bak Fei departed. If he'd just teach us some ideographs. Wang Gum punched his arm. It's forbidden, idiot! We're not ready! He shuddered. Why would you want to read that evil thing anyway? Another day, as they patrolled together, Wang Gum's head jerked up. What's that? What's what? Hong Lung grunted. He was staring at the swirling ink titles. If he squinted, he could just make out ideograph radicals, words solidifying. His shoulder hurt again. Brother, you don't hear that? Brother? Wang Gum never addressed him as a fellow monk. Surprise pulled Hong Lung from the chaotic writing, and he heard the rumbling growl. He'd heard it before, whenever his eyes settled onto the books. Why hadn't he ever recognized it as a growl? They followed the noise, turning a corridor. When the shelves melted away, they were in a rocky pit. A dark forest loomed over them, trunks ashen gray and leaves blood red, letting through a lurid light. From a dark cavern, luminous eyes glowered at them. The growling came from there. Hot animal musk stung their nostrils.
Slowly, acolytes!
They whirled to find Bak Fei staring grimly at the cavern.
The library was created from a testing labyrinth, he said. The original labyrinth. It's shifting because a book is close to breaking free. A very powerful one.
Hong Lung watched the beast stalk out its cave, sinewy, muscled legs and padding footfalls, fury clothed in feline grace, bared fangs, jet black fur. Black tiger, he whispered. He and Wang Gum moved together, elbows and knees bent for snow leopard guards the pass. A forbidden animal style, Wang Gum hissed. When Ta Lin's monks first fled the violence of the mundane world, they created Black Tiger to defend themselves. But the style was so savage, it was banished from monastery teachings. Of course it would end up here. Bak Fei pointed. The rocks blurred, revealing a portal back to the library's familiar shelves.
I'll handle this. Return and guard the library.
Wang Gum jumped through the portal. Hong Lung hesitated. His master looked so tired.
I said go!
Bak Fei's command dispelled Hong Lung's hesitation. So this was why his master disappeared so often. To hunt out feral books. This was how dangerous these ideas were. Before stepping through the portal, Hong Lung felt an enormous surge of qi from Bak Fei as he prepared for battle. Wang Gum ran for the abbot, while Hong Lung waited in the library. But Bak Fei soon emerged from another portal. He was pale.
It's contained,
he gasped.
I need to rest.
In that moment, Hong Lung saw through the Bak Fei of legend to the weathered man beneath. He helped Bak Fei to a chair. He wanted to confess about the book biting him. Perhaps Bak Fei could explain why his shoulder ached. But what would Bak Fei do? Expel him, like the last apprentices? Hong Lung asked a different question. Master, what about the book with the strange glyph? Bak Fei stopped rubbing his forehead.
Oh, yes. That one came from deep within the library. An ancient text. From before my time, even.
I think we would have figured it out, Hong Lung said. The ink solidifies if I concentrate.
Stop being so eager, Bak Fei snapped. You need to prepare yourself for what's inside these books. The last apprentices who mastered the ink became dissatisfied with monastery life. They rejected our teachings. Some joined the warlords.
Honglong gasped. Some warlords are former warrior monks? He'd heard stories about warlord generals with superhuman abilities. It made sense if they were former chi weavers.
If the texts are so corrupting, why expose us?
He asked. But he realized the answer as soon as he finished speaking. He saw again the tired lines on his master's face.
You don't just need apprentices. You need new librarians.
Bak Fei closed his eyes like he'd die right there.
It's no easy thing, Acolyte, holding back ideas.
Honglong figured his master was right. He should control his eagerness. These ideas were dangerous. There were things like Black Tiger lurking here. Maybe the last apprentices had failed because they'd been tempted by such powerful arts. And anyway, the swirling ink still eluded him. Every time he looked, the calligraphy shivered, and he had to turn away or vomit. His shoulder twitched, an itch within the bone no amount of meditation or chi healing would settle. Eventually, the itch won. Dreams of swirling blackness pulled Honglong past the sleeping acolytes in his dormitory, down the dark stone corridors. Before the library's double doors, he unwove the barrier seal. The lanterns cast islands of light in the library's nighttime darkness. The texts were blissfully still, a prison of slumbering books. Even the ever-swirling calligraphy moved lethargically. Honglong's breath caught. Lethargically? It was nearly legible. His shoulder throbbed. That was when Honglong snapped out of his trance. What was he doing? These books were forbidden for a reason. They transformed reality, attacked. But he followed the ghostly pull through the maze-like shelves, stopping finally at the book with the strange glyph. He laid it on a table, the cover warm to the touch. A final twinge in his shoulder. Black smoke spooling down his arm, onto the book that had bitten him, the smoky vein just heavy enough to halt the swirling calligraphy. 1,000 Adventure Tales, he read. Such a dull title. How could this be a forbidden text? Yet the readable pages thrilled Honglong. It was like poring over his training sutras as a novice, puzzling out chi weavings that baffled his peers. He should report this to Bak Fei, or even tell Wang Gum, shouldn't he? A whispery breeze wafted through the corridors, like the ones channeling through the library in daytime, only quieter. Honglong had the chilling impression of being watched from the darkened shelves. But there was nothing there. He turned back to the book. Honglong hadn't progressed faster than his peers by doing nothing. He'd studied long after they slept. How was this different? And hadn't Bak Fei said that to resist the forbidden ideas, he needed to first read them? So Honglong sat and turned the page. What's wrong? Wang Gum asked as they carried blankets into the courtyard. Honglong shook off his sleepiness. That book was thicker than it looked. What he thought would take an hour to read stretched until nearly dawn, and he'd only made it halfway through. I'm fine, brother. The word was still clumsy on his tongue. You look sick, Wang Gum persisted. Honglong shrugged and set off with his blankets. He dared not tell Wang Gum what he'd done. He'd read a tale of 9 sons, another of a child born with fire and wind wheels beneath his feet, one about a monkey hatching from a celestial egg. Silly stories, but fascinating. How had the ancient hunter monks deemed them dangerous? The refugee children recovered faster than the adults, groups running in hide-and-seek games. Honglong found a boy sitting by himself, staring blankly into the distance. Dried tear streaks ran down his dirty cheeks. Honglong was much the same when he'd first arrived here. The air turned cold as the sun dipped low, so Honglong wrapped a blanket around the boy's shoulders. Take care, he said. The boy said nothing, a rock of sadness in the lonely high mountains. The work of guarding the forbidden texts, it was to prevent this sadness, wasn't it? Honglong sighed and moved on. Honglong's shoulder no longer hurt, but now the books whispered incessantly to him. He could see why Bak Fei always looked strained. The forbidden ideals fought not just for escape, but against each other. Light is a wave. No, a particle. No, both wave and particle. There is one God. There are many. No, we become gods if we shed our mortal desires. Dynastic rule is celestially ordained. Dynasties must be overthrown by the proletariat, no matter how bloody the process. Earth circles the sun. Nay, the sun and planets revolve around us. The world rests on a turtle's back, balanced on an elephant, which stands upon another turtle and another. Turtles all the way down. Bak Fei approached Honglong and Wang Gum with another challenge.
Abbot requests the Foggy Swamp Sutra. He wants to create an antidote for the warlord's toxic darts.
He waited expectantly. Wang Gum set off. Honglong followed. Foggy Swamp was a book of poisons, as dark in reputation as Black Tiger. Problem was, they weren't supposed to know how to find it. Or were they? Should Honglong reveal his mastery over the swirling ink? He heard Bak Fei following him. His heart raced. Wang Gum stopped before a wall of books where he hovered, at a loss. The glyphs had guided Wang Gum, so Honglong could claim the same. But how to explain that the crackly manuscript on the third shelf was the requested volume? Its calligraphy, cold and straight as black spider legs, beckoned to Honglong. Alongside the whispering texts, it crooned about boons granted by dark potions. Bak Fei looked relieved at their hesitance.
Slowly, acolytes.
He took the volume and left. Wang Gum rounded on Honglong. Why ask for a book we can't find? The ink still wiggles for you? Honglong asked. Makes me want to puke every time I'm here. You? I can make out more than before, Honglong said. Not an exact lie, but Wang Gum narrowed his eyes. More than before? Brother, you've been very tired lately. How much time have you been spending here? Too much, Honglong said, which was the full truth. The refugees planned to depart for the warmer southern lands soon. The elders were relieved. Together they planned the safest route through the warlord's territories. The lone boy stayed in the same place, staring listlessly at the mist-shrouded peaks, the one constant in Honglong's exhausting days. Leave him, another acolyte said when Honglong tried giving the boy some bread. He eats when he's hungry, he sleeps when he wants. It's all we can do. Where's your family? Honglong asked the boy. Killed, of course, the acolyte said, rearranging vials of Abbot's poison antidotes on a tray. If that boy doesn't snap out of it, we'll have another novice on our hands. Another novice, Honglong thought. Yes, he'd be taken as an orphan initiate to a life of hard training. The replacement of worldly sorrow with the pain of learning Thalin's fighting arts, sparring matches, and the summoned nightmares of the testing labyrinths. Mundane sorrows scrubbed away with the purity of enlightenment. The orphan was around 9, as Honglong had been. They'd start with cold conditioning first, forcing him to harness chi against the mountain cold. They'd take the blankets away, make him crawl for breakfast, throw rocks at his back. A flurried shadow attacked Honglong in the corridors that night. Moonlight shafts revealed White Tiger clawing sheep. It was Wang Gum. Honglong wrapped his limbs about his rival with coiling serpent. They wrestled silently before breaking apart, panting. "I knew it!" Wang Gum hissed. "You can read the ink!" "Bak Fei said we would when we were ready," Hong Lung hissed back. "Well, I'm ready!" The darkness blanked out Wang Gum's face, but his body was tense. "Brother, don't you see? The books are infecting you. It's what happened to the failed apprentices." "If the elders read them, why aren't they infected?" Hong Lung countered. "Why did Bak Fei expect us to find Foggy Swamp? How do you know that wasn't a test?" Wang Gum stepped back into the shadows. "I'm not failing. Hear me, orphan? I'm not failing." And he was gone. After that night, Wang Gum kept a wary distance. Hong Lung should have quit then. Wang Gum would strike eventually. But Hong Lung couldn't stop reading. There was learning on those shelves. Just what had those last apprentices found that got them expelled? The nighttime library contained volumes on philosophy, science, literature, and the silence to digest them. And there was something strange about the adventure tales. The further he read, the more he struggled with the calligraphy until it was just as swirly and nauseating as before. Unlike the other texts, this book never whispered to him, but he heard Bak Fei's warning. "Slowly, acolyte." Hong Lung kept at the squiggly text until he realized the shelves around him were shifting. The stone floor melted into a craggy pit. Dry winds shook the blood-red leaves of the trees above, and the all-too-familiar musk alerted Hong Lung to Black Tiger padding toward him. Hong Lung trembled before those baleful eyes. Then, a book flew in Tiger's face, riffling its pages against Tiger's nose. The adventure tales! Tiger sneezed. The chaotic ink of the book's latter pages streamed off, the part Hong Lung couldn't read, forming... "A monkey?" Hong Lung gasped. "Another animal style?" Like Black Tiger's fur, the monkey that emerged was composed of thousands of lines of arcane ideographs. Before, Hong Lung had only perceived Tiger as a beast, but it seemed his mastery of the ink allowed him to see these library creatures for what they really were, beings of pure writing. The monkey hopped onto Tiger's massive head, grabbing its ears and kicking its eyes. Black Tiger roared, but the book that was a monkey climbed along the great cat's underside. Monkey howled, revealing gleaming white teeth, and its attacks rocked Tiger off balance. Hong Lung touched his shoulder. Was that what bit him? With a final whoop, Monkey leapt away. Black Tiger disintegrated into ink, pages, a spine, a cover, a book clattering onto the floor, its chaotic writing stilled. Hong Lung felt a tug on his sleeve. Monkey clambered up his arm, onto his shoulder. It patted Hong Lung's face with tiny paws, as if feeling for something. It blinked and yawned, as if waking from a long nap. Hong Lung read his nights away until the morning of the refugees' departure. He found the orphan at his usual spot. "Little boy," he said, "I'd like to read you something." From beneath some blankets, Hong Lung revealed what he'd smuggled out the library. 1,000 adventure tales. The boy's eyes shifted ever so slightly. "You're interested," Hong Lung said. "I can tell." Hong Lung read the story of the Monkey King, who ruled over Flower Fruit Mountain and became a heavenly sage who, for his audacity, was buried under a mountain for 500 years. One day, Monkey was... Hong Lung paused, because Monkey had pulled himself from the pages, sniffing the outside air. Hong Lung wanted to shut the book, but Monkey climbed onto the orphan's lap. The boy's eyes widened, but he didn't cry out. One day, Monkey was freed from his prison, Hong Lung continued, and Monkey let himself be petted. Hong Lung smiled as he walked towards the library. He'd read about the Monkey King zooming about on his flying cloud mount, magical staff in hand. The boy listened with a brighter look in his eyes, bright enough to leave with the other refugees. If the boy kept imagining, maybe he could free himself to start a new life. When Honglong entered the library, though, his smile faded. He thought the library had shifted again, like whenever Black Tiger attacked, but the figures of Bak Fei and Wang Gum were very real. "See, master," Wang Gum crowed. "He sneaks here every night. He smuggled something out." Disappointment lined Bak Fei's face.
"What have you done?"
"Master," Honglong stammered.
"Show me!"
Honglong brought out the forbidden book, but the text crackled in his fingers. He thought Monkey would fly out, but the spine crumbled. The pages blackened, breaking into ashen flecks that vanished before hitting the cold stone floor. "I didn't know books escaped that way," Honglong said. Surely the last failed apprentices hadn't released a forbidden text. They hadn't done what he'd done. "The book was the container," Abbot replied. "It's the ideas behind the words that are dangerous. Once the text is read, the idea has escaped." Honglong stood in the main hall before Abbot. The monastery's elders ranged on either side. Bak Fei stood to Abbot's left. "The monkey you freed wasn't harmless," Abbot continued. Like all the elders, Abbot's meditation beads were enormous. "Sun Wukong! You freed Sun Wukong!" The elders murmured, and Abbot thumped his staff against the floor for quiet. Honglong gaped, awestruck. "The one imprisoned under the mountain? I suppose that makes sense." "Sun Wukong is a shapeshifter, a trickster, rebellion incarnate, the most forbidden ideal of all."
"It posed as a storybook,"
Bak Fei murmured in wonder.
"Disguised its glyph. No wonder I couldn't recognize it."
The monks argued again, glaring at Honglong. It was strange how Honglong only now realized how cold they were, how devoid of sympathy when dealing with refugees or even caring for war-ravaged orphans. Their voices were like the whispers inside the library, ideals pushing against each other. Ideals that terrified their tightly ordered thoughts. Honglong turned icy with realization. "You're going after that boy, aren't you?" Abbot gripped his staff with both hands. "It's a dangerous idea to let free, especially in these times. The boy will join our order." Honglong heard Bak Fei sigh at the flagstones. It must have been so trying, shepherding ideas nobody could ever read. All Honglong had ever wanted was to prove himself to these monks, but he realized he had never belonged and never would. He didn't want to become another Bak Fei. It seemed reading the forbidden books had changed him. For the better, he hoped. Honglong shook his head against what Abbot had said. "No, Abbot! It's the perfect time for free ideas!" Abbot exclaimed. "You'd have warring ideologies stalking the world alongside the warlords! Did you forget our last batch of refugees?" "Abbot, the warlords have been fighting even before I came. I read—" Dark muttering when Honglong said that word, but he continued. "I read that Monkey passed the enlightenment test given to him by the Buddha."
"You mean failed," Bak Fei said. "Sun Wukong thought the Buddha's 5 fingers were 5 pillars supporting the heavens. Then he was buried under a mountain for 500 years. Bak Fei trailed off, looking surprised he'd spoken. Honglong supposed it made sense how Bak Fei reacted. He was a librarian, having access to powerful ideas, yet never able to share them. "No, master. I mean how Monkey survived his imprisonment, then journeyed to recover the great sutras. Don't you see? Sun Wukong's story doesn't have to be dangerous. He can be interpreted many different ways. He's rebellion and trickery, but he's also courage and determination. The world needs that now.
Maybe Monkey being out there can help. He helped that boy.
Bak Fei rubbed his chin. It's dangerous when you think things like Black Tiger or the Trickster Monkey belong out there.
Master, the world was dangerous before Monkey escaped.
The warlords use poison darts now! Abbott shouted. See how cruel people's minds can be!
But Abbott, Honglong countered, weren't you using Foggy Swamp to create antidotes? Who gets to decide which ideas are dangerous and which go free? In the end, it was no use. Bak Fei's eyes followed Honglong as he left the hall. He saw Wang Gum leaning against the outside wall, arms folded. He'd heard everything. He spat as Honglong passed. Honglong walked down the mountain path from Dalin, his few possessions in a carry sack. At the guardian lion statues, he was surprised to see Bak Fei. His former master had exchanged his heavy beads and robes for grey tunic and boots. His eyes looked clearer in the misty morning air. Master? You're leaving the monastery?
You're trying to catch up with the boy, Bak Fei said by way of reply.
Yes, Honglong said. I don't think he should be forced into monkhood.
As they walked, Bak Fei said, When you read to him, you released Monkey, and the book containing that idea disintegrated. But if the pursuing monks can perform the appropriate chi weavings before the boy, they can recover the book. Maybe he doesn't have to join.
Honglong clenched his fists as he imagined the monks, those elders who always thought they knew better, tearing Monkey's ingenuity, his mischievous and sense of fun, out the boy's mind. That's terrible. That can't happen.
They'll hunt you too, Bak Fei continued. You're also one of Monkey's keepers.
Then why let me go? Why'd they let the last failed apprentices leave?
Because performing chi weavings on you at the monastery would have troubled the monks in training.
Honglong skidded on the mountain gravel as a terrible thought occurred to him. Master, who pursued your last apprentices? Bak Fei sighed.
I did.
You sapped the minds of former pupils? Dalin was more sinister than Honglong knew. He was right to leave. Honglong leapt back, chi infusing his limbs as he crouched, hands curling into monkey paws. A new animal style. Boxing monkey, weaves and darts. Have you come to reclaim anything from me, master? If Bak Fei was impressed, he didn't show it. In fact, he reverted to his former, sad monastery self.
Dalin wasn't always like how it is now, you know. Centuries of banning ideas has changed them.
He shook his head.
You were right. The ideas should be freed, and I won't hold them back any longer. I want to see what good they can do. What's our plan?
Honglong studied his former master. Bak Fei's tired lines had vanished. His back was straighter, his eyes eager. Honglong released his chi. We have to read Monkey to others. We have to spread the idea. As they set off again, Honglong wondered what the orphan and Monkey were doing. He imagined Monkey jumping high, flying low, leaping onto shoulders, whispering into open ears, inspiring people to become trickster warriors. Maybe they'd learn to resist the warlords. A roar sounded, and Bak Fei's eyebrows raised when he saw Black Tiger padding along a hillside above them. It was a volatile ideal, but like Monkey, perhaps had its hopeful interpretations. For if the monks become too persistent, Honglong explained, they'll be hunting you too, won't they?
You've been a busy reader, Bak Fei said. They wouldn't have released you if they'd realized. Wait, how many books did you read?
Honglong smiled. The cold, gray mountains became alive with blaspheming riders and women warriors, scholar gods and iridescent dragons, diary-writing girls and poisoned philosophers, talking lions, boys born from giant peaches, foul-mouthed heroes, moonlight-drunk poets, wizards, slave stealers. Within the throng, a lone monkey capering along, all trooping into the world beyond.
Andrew tells us Black Tiger is an actual kung fu style, though in the story Black Tiger is described as a forbidden style. All kung fu styles have been banned in the real world at one time or another. Today, anybody may study Black Tiger Kung Fu. Like all martial arts styles, it may be used for self-defense and fitness, or abused for evil purposes. The name Bok Fei is a play on Bok Mei, an infamous figure in kung fu lore. His name means white eyebrow, and he's credited for creating the Bok Mei Kung Fu style. Some view Bok Mei as a villain, while others think of him as a folk hero. One of this story's themes is about how texts can be interpreted. What one group may abhor and ban, another group may venerate. Dalin, Great Forest, is also a play on Shaolin, Small Forest, an actual Buddhist temple in China, famous for its kung fu history. The Shaolin Temple is referred to in countless Chinese martial arts movies and literature. Join us next week for...
Sitting there soaked to the skin by rain and despair, I almost feel inclined to agree with the authority. That book, like most others, is fit only for burning and banning. Pointless, useless, godless, a detrimental waste of time and resources. But Titus doesn't care about any of that. And it's not his fault he can't read the book himself, even though he's 2 years older than me at 16. It's just the way it is with Titus. So, just like I've done every night since Mama and Papa left, I start reading.
Artemis Rising returns next March for its 4th annual installment celebrating women and non-binary authors in genre fiction. Submissions are open throughout September across all 4 Escape Artists podcasts. Cast of Wonders relies on your donations to pay our authors and narrators and to bring you the best in young adult audio fiction week after week. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider making a donation. There are lots of ways you can support us. We're on Patreon, and there are buttons for PayPal donations on our website. Every single donation, whether a one-off or a monthly subscription, makes a huge difference, and you have, as always, our heartfelt thanks. You can share the love for this story by leaving both it and us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our episodes are designed with your commute in mind, so please share them with your family and friends. You can also join the discussion on the EA Forum, forum.escapeartists.net. And we're at Cast of Wonders on Twitter. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of assistant editors Danny Daly and Catherine Inskip, associate editors Amy Brennan, Alexis Goebel, Andrew Kim, Aiken Patel, Susie Rodriguez, Muddy Schleider, Chris Tang, and Xander Simon. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter, and I remain, as always, your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can share it, download it, and listen on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme Appeal to Heavens is by Alexei Nov, available at Promo DJ or his Facebook page, which you can find in our show notes. Thanks for listening.